Yeah, hi folks. Now, the other day I covered a story about how Ardern is allowing Communist China to take over New Zealand. And this is happening simply because we're now living in a pseudo-communist country as it is. Both National and Labour are essentially the same. They're virtually morphed into one. They both allow Communist China to buy up our farms, buy up our businesses, and they allow the export of our jobs to China. They both believe in UN globalism, climate change, mass immigration, and multiculturalism, etc. And they are essentially the same on all social issues, including the woke stuff. So don't be surprised if you see New Zealand follow Australia with that Marxist, racist, critical race theory hate.
Another thing, another threat, another idiocy we've got to confront. The New South Wales Education Department, what the hell is that up to? Why has it decided to teach white students to hate themselves and teach the rest of the class to hate their country? I mean, this mad education department has now got an online race sensitivity course for students called Racism No Way, that preaches to our children the kind of inflammatory race politics that's already tearing America apart. Now, this course is also being used by some schools interstate. You can go and check it out yourself. I will bet that you have never seen an education course in this country that is so destructive, so ignorant, so dishonest, defeatist, divisive, so racist and so petty. And to think that this poison is being pumped into our schools by an education minister, Sarah Mitchell, of a supposedly liberal government.
Yeah, now to understand that, you've just got to look at her fake conservative boss.
Independent MP Alex Greenwich will introduce the Reproductive Healthcare Reform Bill to Parliament. The bill is being co-sponsored by 15 MPs from across the political divide. New South Wales is the last.
And she joined that cabal and tried to secretly get the bill passed in 3 or 4 days.
State to decriminalise abortion.
The Premier believes there's no place for judgment when it comes to abortions.
I think it's important for that to be a decision for the woman and for the state not to cast judgment on the morality of that decision.
Wow. So people shouldn't pass judgment on the murder of innocent babies right up until birth. Yeah, really. And her boss is just as bad. He's a fake conservative as well.
Well, the Prime Minister has announced a ministerial reshuffle following weeks of scandal that have engulfed his government. Senator Michaelia Cash has been appointed Australia's new Attorney-General, replacing Christian Porter. Foreign Minister Marise Payne will lead a task force of new ministerial roles, including women's safety and women's economic security. Mr Morrison has described her role as the Prime Minister for Women. Karen Andrews has received a big promotion to Minister for Home Affairs, while Peter Dutton becomes Defence Minister. Scott Morrison says his new cabinet will have the strongest female representation in Australian history.
Yeah, this is nothing less than far-left affirmative action, much the same as what our communist government does in New Zealand.
The most diverse cabinet in New Zealand's history was sworn in on Friday. It includes the first female foreign minister, Nania Mahuta, who also happens to be Maori and has a facial tattoo. She sang as she entered the ceremony and chose to recite her oath in her Indigenous language. Of the 20-strong body, 8 are women, 5 are Maori and 3 are LGBT. Finance Minister Grant Robinson takes up the post of Deputy Prime Minister, the first openly gay man to hold the position. Ardern acknowledged the attention her appointments had drawn, but emphasised their experience and talent.
Experience and talent? You've got to be kidding.
Now, I say this racism no way course is destructive because it trashes Australia, claims Australia's riddled with institutional racism. It's only lucky for a select few. And we've got racist schools just reflecting white middle-class values. I say racism, no way, is also ignorant because it claims that Aborigines on average live shorter lives, which they do, thanks to the historical legacy of dispossession and racism, when the truth is that the Aboriginal health and welfare statistics are worse in Aboriginal settlements that are actually more connected to Aboriginal culture. Culture, not racism, explains a lot here. And I'm saying that racism no way is dishonest, in part because students are shown a film that says this.
The moment a white person is born, they're afforded certain privileges. While the extent and nature of their privilege varies from country to country, one thing's consistent. If you're white, society be like, you out here winning.
That's dishonest because here we're trying to get children to believe that we've somehow got a legacy like America's of slavery and all that. That's dishonest. And dishonest because there are plenty of children born white who are born poor.
Exactly.
Or to parents who are drug addicts or who abuse them. And these kids are not winning anything. And this video is even more dishonest when it claims this as evidence of our racism and our white privilege. Data, by the way, yet again from the US, not Australia at all.
And what about jobs? With the exception of Asian men, all groups make less than white men when we talk about median hourly earnings.
The way that line, with the exception of Asian men, all the other minorities earn less, immediately destroys that whole argument that race, rather than, say, culture, explains why some groups don't do so well.
Exactly. And the deliberate destruction of the family unit as well. Anyway, now to another take on this story.
Your starting position in this race will be decided by the answers to questions that we are going to be asking you.
Sorry, what?
If English is your parents' first language, take a step forward.
Oh, yeah.
If you have ever been the only person in the room of your race, take a step backwards.
It's kind of frustrating that, like, me and Sarah are just standing at the back here while the majority of people who may be white are, like, standing right at the front. That just frustrates me a bit, because it's almost as in what society is today. I don't want this to be how it is, but it is, so it just gets a bit frustrating.
Well, if you're anything like me, you found that pretty hard to watch. Horrifying, in fact. You know, let's make no bones about this. What you have just witnessed is primary school children in England being divided along racial lines.
Yeah, under Boris Johnson, another fake conservative. Can you see what's going on here, folks? Democracies around the world are being destroyed by fake conservatives from within.
You know, I used to think that saying no to racism meant getting beyond our historical and centuries-old fixation with race. I thought it meant forgetting about race. I didn't think that it meant spending every waking second talking about nothing but...
Yes, I completely understand that.
...bloody skin colour and obsessing with terrible injustices, like this, for example.
First, white privilege provides white people with perks. Some perks go unnoticed, like being able to actually use complimentary shampoo and conditioner at a hotel.
Hey, I get it. I, of all people, understand the terrible trauma of not having your preferred shampoo on hand. But, I mean, come on.
Hey.
Now, some may argue that it's important to teach our kids that racism is wrong, and that may be true. But maybe when it comes to kids and racism, we should stick with the classics, like this.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
And the content of my character, not the colour of my skin.
Anyway, this is all important because critical race theory isn't just being foisted on kids in dreary British documentaries. It's happening to our kids in Australian schools. And in this weekend's edition of The Spectator Australia, the IPA's Dr. Bella de Brera lays out the horrifying
New South Wales, home of white privilege. Berejiklian.
Details of her research into the matter. Let's hear from her now. Well, now we welcome back to Counterculture from the Institute of Public Affairs, Dr. Bella de Brera. Congratulations on being our first returning guest to Counterculture. So let's get right into it. Anti-racism training for kids. Now, what are primary age children learning about anti-racism right now in Australian schools?
Well, this is New South Wales, to specify where it is. But it's actually kindergarten children as well. It's not really,
kindergarten.
They're starting at 3 and 4 year olds because
you're joking.
I wish I was joking. So at the moment they're giving 3 and 4 year olds an introduction to anti-prejudice training. They're not really talking about racism at this point. They're getting into this idea of difference. And they're using subtle techniques. They're talking about understanding difference and understanding, why you're different to the little person that you're playing with next door.
Yeah.
And they're using things like Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches, which is quite funny because, this is now banned material.
Yeah, correct.
So they're going to have to get onto that. And
I thought Dr. Seuss was racist now. They're using it for anti-racism training.
Yes.
From what you've written for The Spectator Australia, that's just an entree into the next course, which is for getting deeper into primary school. What does that look like?
Yeah, so they work their way up quite subtly. They're very clever about this. This is not talking immediately to 3-year-olds about racial privilege and white privilege. No. So by the time they get sort of 10 years old, they're starting to teach them about how to recognize racism.
Right.
Yeah, so if they're teaching kids how to recognise racism, they are clearly promoting it.
They're introducing them to the idea of racism being a problem in their school, in their classroom. It's becoming more personalised, perhaps you're a racist and you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that they're getting. So that, look at the teacher's notes and you look at the classroom activities.
Primary school kids are already being told you may be a latent racist and not even know about it.
Yes, this is when they're 10.
So they're already imparting this original sin of whiteness.
Yes.
So what does then happen when high school arrives?
Yeah, well, so they get to 13 or 14. So between 13 and 16, they're getting lessons on institutional racism. So they've already told them that there's a problem with their own race, and now they're telling them there's a more general problem, which is the problem of institutions in Australia. They're saying that our political, our governmental, our healthcare is all institutionally racist.
Right. Okay.
And they're telling us that there's a problem with the Australian flag. So one of the classroom activities is said, have a look at the emblems on the flag and do you think this is still relevant for Australia in 2021?
It's this recurring theme. So by around primary school, they start being taught to basically hate themselves. And towards the end, it's hating their country. This is frightening.
Well, yes, and then later on, then you get the whole critical race theory unleashed on the sort of the older students, which is even worse. So I think we need to talk about it because it's insidious, and this is imported straight out of America. This is America is just totally obsessed with race at the moment. And critical race theory is now the dominant ideology in schools there.
We do not want to reach a stage in Australia where you have marauding gangs going around burning down Starbucks and so on. We do not want that here. But this is, as you said, this is how it starts.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the logical conclusion. This is where this goes. So critical race theory is a rehash of the Marxian dichotomy of bourgeois versus proletariat. They've just made it white versus black.
Yeah, now if you think this Marxist indoctrination won't come to New Zealand, think again. Now this is a public lecture from Canterbury University last August.
So kia ora everyone, my name is Tori McNo. It's a huge pleasure to be here amongst some pretty powerful people. To say the least, people, that's what we are. My job here tonight is alongside Janine to be the kai whakapauho or the MC, the moderator, whatever you want to call it, and empower these beautiful people beside me.
Who are all on the same side.
To give some kōrero about some pretty heavy topics. So I think the first thing I want to acknowledge tonight is well done for walking through the door. It's on the face of it pretty confronting, and thank you for being here. And secondly, to let you know, we're going to pop over to our panellists in a minute, but before that we wanted to frame this kōrero with a bit of a video, and I'm just going to leave it at that, and we'll talk after it.
Consider myself, as you do, a part of an ethnic group.
I just wonder, doesn't you that the fact that you have no answer to that could actually be a source of meaning, experience, or knowledge?
The opposite is how I feel about you, that you have no comprehension that the world is open to. You think that the white man is a block and a dam to your progress, and he is not. I think you put up that dam and that block yourself, in your regard to the white man.
I think that's one of the major problems with racism. I think he did answer the question. As a white man, he doesn't have to think about his position in life, his place in the world. The history books tell him, as they are written, that this world is his. He doesn't have to think about where he goes, what he does. He doesn't have to think like a white person. The way the world has been set up, America in particular, white is human. Right, that's what a human being is. They step into a world that is theirs.
Back to the question of what it means to be white. I think what it means to be white, in part, is that you have the privilege of blaming people of color for their own victimization under white supremacy. I've heard you say that to me. I've heard you say that to him. I've heard you say that to him. I've heard you say it to him. I've heard you say it to every person of color in the room who challenged your perception of yourself in the world. That is part of what it means to be white.
Maybe that's part of the answer. That we feel that the field is wide open and each man can stand on his own.
No. Each man does not stand on his own. Some men stand on other men and other women. Light-skinned men. Men from your stand on the heads and the hearts of men and women and children of color. That is, and of course, you also stand on the heads of white women. But no, it's not a question of every man standing on his own ground. All of the ground, damn near, of this planet has been taken from almost all of the people of color on this planet. Australia was a black continent. Africa was a black continent. North America was a red continent. South America was a red continent. You are not standing on your own ground. You are standing on red ground. And that's what it means to be white. To say that you're standing on your own ground and standing on somebody else's. And then mystify the whole process so it seems like you're not doing that.
Yeah, I'll stop it there. You can see where that's going. Yeah, now folks, it's clear to me that critical race theory is not about stopping racism, it's about expanding it. So if parents don't want their children to grow up hating themselves, they've got to get organised and stamp it out, because the government most certainly isn't going to stop it.